Good evening. Welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and this evening we have two guests, Chief Jim Spinney, Chief of Police, and Chief Gary Ryan, Chelmsford's Fire Chief. So this, I guess, is a public safety show.
Here we go.
And what I'd like to do is start the way we start every show, and we'll ask each of you to just give us a brief biographical summary of your educational and professional background. So,
I think we can. I've known Jim, but yeah, because we've gone to school together, and I say school together. We went to high school together, UMass Lowell together.
you guys are townies, right?
Yeah. When I say we went to school together, UMass Lowell, we were in every single class for 4 years. So it got me through for 4 years.
Yeah.
And then obviously when we finished school, we kind of went our separate ways. I went into Department of Corrections, and Jim obviously went into the police service. And then at some point back in 1993, for me, I got back to the town, had an opportunity to get in the fire department, and obviously Jim made it, what, 94?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in Chelmsford as well, and Gary and I both graduated Chelmsford High together, and like Chief Ryan said, we both attended UMass Lowell at the same time, and on purpose, what we did was we lined up each other's schedules to be a fail-safe for each other in case one of us missed a class. So we actually completed our criminal justice degree using the same courses as a you know, like again, like almost like a network for each other. And the funny part is, like I was telling you, Gary's father was a deputy police chief, and my father was a fire captain.
Right.
And we each did the reverse career. So.
And I remember both of your fathers, and excellent men, and credit to each department. So yeah, that's very interesting. You know?
I think that's why we have an appreciation for each other and each other's work and stuff. We have the insight. I think I think the insight's important.
And they and your fathers didn't object to you going in the opposite, so to speak, direction, did they? I mean,
no. My father just wanted me to. He was happy I was doing public service. I mean, I say public service. My brother's on the fire department. My sister's a nurse. My younger brother was in the Navy, so it was kind of in the family to do public service. So I think he was just happy to see that it was fulfilling that.
Yeah, same for mine. My father was very supportive, and he actually told me that he had recommended law enforcement would be a better fit for me. So.
And again, I think there's some truth to that. I think there's some personality alignment that fits the profession, any profession, actually. So, well, both of you, I mean, you're obviously very successful, having been born and grown up in Chelmsford, and you've risen through the ranks, which is I think, somewhat unique in management circles. And I mean, I don't mean to compare public safety to private sector work, but the police department and the fire department are two organizations where I think almost 100% of the time the chief executive, the chief of police and the chief of the fire actually started at the bottom and worked their way up through the ranks. Sure. And how do you feel about that? You feel that that's the right way to do it, as opposed to, you know, somebody who maybe isn't a public safety professional coming in and saying, well, I'm a manager and I don't really need to have that background, I just need to know how to be a good manager.
Well, obviously I agree with that, you know, obviously there's something to be said for working your way up. However, I think it was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it was probably John Fasana back in 1995 when they were looking at bringing in the public safety director. There was that whole discussion back then of having a public safety director overseeing the two chiefs. And I think that's probably about the time when Bill Dalton ran for the Board of Selectmen, if I recall.
That's exactly the time.
So that, you know, but that was, I was a new member on the department at the time, and I just remember this discussion about the makeup. Not just the fire department, the police department, and then just having a professional manager to oversee for administrative work. But I think we both have done a pretty good job of administrating the department.
Yeah, I think I've garnered a lot of skills, and I think I'm a more effective chief because I went through every rank.
Exactly.
I was in the patrol division, you know, most of my career. 10 years I was a patrol officer. I was a patrol sergeant for 5 years, so I was a patrol supervisor. I was a lieutenant for 8 years as a shift commander, and then I was deputy chief for a year and a half. So when you put it all together, and then when I talk with the officers and I talk with my command staff, they know I'm coming from a position of, look, I experienced what you're experiencing now. We have to change direction in some things, you know, the professions have both changed so much the last 20 years. The collaborative nature of both jobs now is immense compared to how it was. And that's not to say they did it wrong back then. The culture was different. Right. Each department was much more focused on smaller issues as almost like a territorial.
And we had those discussions all the time about, you know, back in the day, territorial issues. And quite honestly, you didn't have as many police officers coming down to visit us at the firehouse. That's when the doors were open.
Yes,
firefighters were out front, people would see us on North Road, and the police officers, you know, not many would stop in, but you know, certainly that has changed. And same with me coming down to the police department.
Yeah, Gary,
that would have never.
Yeah, we
you know,
talk regularly,
happened.
and we have to because of all the collaborative training we do together. Both departments are interwoven with school safety as well as other things in town. But I think coming up through the ranks may be a better supervisor.
I think it makes you more effective too, because you can say, "Look, I'm not just preaching this stuff. I think you've got to be able to say, I've done this stuff." You know,
well,
and I've had those discussions with with my firefighters, with my officers. I understand where you are and where you're trying to go, but you know, I like to be able to say, you know, I've done it.
Well, I think, and I agree with both of you, and I've had that experience myself. You know, working in private sector, starting as an individual contributor and working up through the ranks. And the other thing I find, to your point, Gary, is the people who work under you, if they know that at least at some point you've actually done their job, it's a lot easier to manage people like that. The last thing you want is an employee that looks at you and says, he doesn't have a clue, because he's never ridden in a cruiser or he's never ridden on a fire truck or whatever the situation happens to be. So I don't think there's any substitute for that, but there are plenty of management consultants out there that will tell you that it isn't important, and like you, I disagree. I think it's extremely important.
I will say this though, the chief's jobs are so much more involved with finance and budget.
Oh, sure.
And working with the other town entities, the town manager. It's apples and oranges as far as day to day, but you really can't lose sight of the personnel mission.
Right, and that's happening.
That's why you really have to experience the whole.
Right, we have several little meetings before the budget actually gets presented before a finance committee, whether it's with Darlene, John Souza, with the town manager, with a combination of the three of them. Anna Griffin works in my office. Anna has worked with John Souza before, and she has that background. So I mean, she helps draft that budget.
Right.
So I mean, there's a lot of behind the scenes support, and I'm thankful to have that. To have that experience in my office.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the differences between police and fire service today as opposed, and I'll use myself as a frame of reference. I was born in 1947, so I grew up in the 1950s and early 60s, and I remember what it was like back then. And we knew a lot. My father was a part-time police officer in my town. And so I knew a lot of the police, knew the chief very well. And in those days, and also on the fire service, we had friends there. And if you wanted to be a police officer back then, and this is a town, it was the town of Concord, so at that time it was 12,000 people, okay? And you put in an application, and the selectman made the hire, because it wasn't a strong town manager form of government back then in that town. And whatever the minimum qualifications were, but they said, okay, you've got the job. You went down to the town clerk, they swore you in. 2 days later, you showed up at the police station, and the chief says, here's a gun, here's a badge, ride with this guy, goodbye. Okay? And similar for the fire department.
Absolutely.
Okay? So that's the way it was 65 years ago. I think in most of your smaller towns, I mean, I understand that cities like Boston probably had formal training programs. Right. But in the suburban towns, that was typical. So how does that differ from what you guys do today in terms of qualifications for a firefighter or a police officer and the type of training and expectations that you have for the staff? I
would just say for us, we didn't even have those. We didn't even have that. I was the first group that had to become EMTs. Prior to that, basic first responders, CPR. But my group that got hired back in 1993, we had to become EMTs. And then obviously a lot of when I was in that first class, most of the department was in it. Which was a great symbol. They didn't have to be, but they did it. They joined in to be EMTs. As far as the training, eventually, sometime probably around 1995 or 6, you had to go through the academy. It's in the contract.
So is that a state requirement or?
Local. It's
Okay.
a local requirement. However, now that we are an OSHA state, having talked to the chiefs in this area, I don't know of any department that will, first of all, we used to bring people on before they would go to the academy. Now, for us, we're revisiting that. We'll bring somebody in maybe a few weeks ahead of academy date, do some in-house training, but they won't be considered part of what we call shift strength. Meaning we run down, say, 2 or 3 firefighters, they won't be part of that. They'll be an additional person. They'll learn how to drive because they don't really do a lot of driving at the Mass Fire Academy. But we have certainly changed our approach, and I'm saying within the past couple of years, we would bring somebody in, have them work pretty much right away before they went into the academy.
But on a restricted basis, like you said.
Even then, back, it wasn't that long ago, you can go back maybe 6, 7 years ago, we would bring them in, train them for about 6 weeks in-house. They would be an extra person on, they would call them the back step. They would sit there for, they would be a back step person extra for 2 weeks, so about 8 weeks, and then they would be kind of part of shift strength. So they could be 1 or 2 people in the center station until they go to the academy, which could be months away.
And how long is the academy training?
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
So that has all changed. So now when we bring somebody in, and I have somebody now who's starting the academy in a couple of weeks, he's been with us for a few weeks, but we've sent him to EMT training during the day. We've never done that before. An EMT boot camp for 3.5 weeks. It was a long drive. He had to go to Carver, Mass. But in 3.5 weeks, he completed the class. He took his physical test, hands-on test, took the written test, and within 5.5 weeks, he became an EMT. Whereas when I started as an EMT, it took about 6 months.
Wow.
They still have those programs out there, but now he'll go to the academy in December. We'll get him probably in February. So, and then he'll be part of our group.
That's good. And
So we're extremely structured and lengthy. They have to take the state exam for civil service, choose Chelmsford as an option. Then when we call for a list, let's say we need 2 officers, we get the list from the state. It takes us 2.5, 3 months to vet out a candidate, background check, psychological check, occupational physical. That takes the better side of 2 months. Then when we select the candidates, they have to attend a 6-month police academy. So all said and done, it takes us almost a year from the moment of seeing a name on a list to they're in the cruiser. And then it's 3 months of training with a field training officer. So over a year before that individual is a viable officer able to respond to calls on his own. So luckily, town manager has always let me hire in advance of a departure. So if I tell the town manager I'm expecting 2 retirements next year, he'll say, go ahead and hire now. Because he knows to wait till next year
lead time, right.
sets me back a year to be understaffed. So that's what we're actually trying to do now. I have 8 guys in the process of being hired right now, 8 officers, because I foresee several retirements next year, and we just want to keep ahead of it.
so what's a typical length of service and or age for retirement for your department?
Mid-50s, averaging about 30 years.
High-stress job, a lot of burnout, a lot of tension. Same thing with the fire.
I would say we're probably a little older, probably early 60s, I would say.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing 54, 55, 56. Yeah, you seem to be a little longer.
And the other thing I would say on a state level for us, and this is an issue, not Chelmsford Fire, at the state level, is that we've had an increase in enrollment in the fire academies from 2013. We had 15,000 people enrolled to 2017, 23,000.
Wow.
So we had a 50% increase, and the problem with that is you have the academy in Stowe, they have another one out in the western part of the state. Now they're looking to open up one up in Bridgewater, former.
So you have to time your hires with the academy.
We've gone from getting the academy,
You're kind of at their mercy.
Yeah, it would take us maybe 2 or 3 months to get somebody in for 9 months. We're being told 9 months to get somebody into the academy.
That's quite a lead time. Now, I followed with great interest the story of your recent hires. And if I understand it correctly, I probably missed a few installments in the paper, but if I understand it correctly, these folks actually did a 4-year program at the college level in criminal justice. And that was considered part of, or at least leading up to, eventual employment. Not that there was any guarantee of employment, but that was all taken into consideration in terms of we want to hire these people. They've had this 4-year criminal justice, and then they actually went to the police academy.
So what you're referring to is Fitchburg offers a police certified academy course. So out of the last half a dozen we've hired, I believe 2 of them have obtained that. So
they get a 4-year undergraduate degree,
And academy.
And
it counts as the academy.
Okay.
So that saves me the 6-month academy.
Wow.
So they make their last semester basically the police academy.
Okay, that makes perfect
But
sense.
that's not statewide. It's really extremely limited. I only know one. It's Fitchburg that does that. Otherwise, they've just obtained their college degree, which is great, and it makes you a much more effective officer, in my opinion. But Fitchburg is the only one, to my knowledge. I'm sure there are others out there that let them work towards academy requirement.
That's a great program, and it sounds to me like, obviously, since the 1950s, both services have been greatly professionalized, driven by the needs of society, I would say, on the one hand. But the other thing that I think has happened, and I'm remembering back in the dark ages, I think back in those days, I think people tend to look at the police officers and firefighters, and this is not meant as a derogatory term, so I'm going to preface that, but people sort of looked at these jobs like blue-collar type jobs. You know what I'm saying? But now, I think a lot of that perception has changed. You're looked upon more like a teacher, professional, have to have quite a bit of formal training and so on and so forth. Whereas in the old days, well, I can remember police officers in my town who didn't have high school diplomas, okay? And again, that's not a pejorative comment.
Right.
I'm just saying
but certainly with the changes.
That's the way it was. Okay?
With all hazards response that we have for the fire department, especially with the hazmat responses we have. I mean, we just heard about the unfortunate incident in Burlington at the Buffalo Wild Wings with the mixing of chemicals.
That's bizarre.
It took the life of a young man, and then unfortunately yesterday at Woburn, at Red Robin, another incident.
Saw that.
And then yesterday again in Merrimack. So hazmat has played a strong role. Chemistry is playing a strong role. If you look at a classroom setting for a firefighter, go back a number of years ago, you're right, we're looking at construction, how these houses are built, how cars are constructed. And now you're having a classroom setting for hazmat, for chemicals. It's quite a change.
Right.
Enormous responsibility now, to your point, though. The training now, de-escalation, crisis intervention training, dealing with mental health. If you had told me 20 years ago that the police and fire would be leading the effort towards mental health and substance abuse treatment, I would have never believed it.
So we just had that training at his police
This
station.
job now is all facilitating solutions-based action. It's not just showing up and talking at people. It's showing
Or being
up
100% reactive. I mean,
Exactly.
you're trying to get out in front of situations and identify those before they occur and become disasters.
It's interesting, he said de-escalation techniques and things that and obviously if somebody's having a medical issue and stuff, and you try to bring them down to a level to...
Right. What shocked me, we've just hired a community services outreach person. And you made the pitch at town meeting, Jim, and I thought to myself, because I'm looking at this thinking, oh, I'm not sure if this is going to fly.
Right.
But it makes perfect sense, and it fed off of your narrative that said, our department has changed, and the expectations are a lot different than they were 30 or 40 years ago, and we have to address a lot of these social issues, and that now has become part of a police officer's job. And we better understand what we're doing. But if we can get a person on a town-wide basis, that's going to take a lot of the burden off of my department, and we're going to be able to focus, take a little bit of that time and focus more on, law enforcement and criminal type activities. So, and I would say the same thing may even be true of the fire service.
Oh, it is, because we have, before Jen started, we were involved with a resident and we had to refer that person to Elder Services. We're mandated reporters. So I was happy to pass that off to her because, you have to meet with their staff, meet with family, have that conference, and this particular resident, we have been to her many, many times. So when Jen started, I didn't want to dump the stuff on her, but we brought her on, brought her up to speed, and she is happily taking the lead on this issue, as well as several issues.
And is it working out to your expectations?
She's fantastic.
She's doing a great job.
She's fantastic. She's
building it as she goes.
And I think she's the model, quite frankly, for other communities. I've had other chiefs ask about her position.
This is great, and I'm going to plug my show for 2 seconds. In 2 weeks, she will be the guest here.
Perfect.
So we're going to be able to follow up some of this stuff with her, and I think that'll be a very
I think I said at town meeting, we had officers tied up 45 minutes to an hour.
It was a compelling argument.
I have, half a dozen officers covering, 35,000 people, and I had officers tied up with the same 5% people 15% of the time, if that makes sense to you.
Oh, it makes perfect sense.
It does. We read the recurring.
I applaud the town for being a leader in this area. I quite frankly think that every town needs to do this because the mental health, it's really a crisis. It really is. Our numbers are through the roof.
And getting worse, it appears to me anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh no, they're through the roof compared to even several years ago.
Wow.
The numbers of mental health calls we deal with, where in many cases people are involuntary hospitalized.
And even I was just talking to Trinity because we're looking at the state level, possibly 2022. Right now, for people, we go to a call for a mental health issue, they got to bring that person to Lowell General. Where does that person belong? You got Solomon right next door, on Barnum Ave. So, but right now they can't transport. They have to transport directly to Lowell General.
Right.
So behind the scenes at the state level, we're trying to get movement so they could actually bring that person directly to the care they need. So, and it's going to take some time, but we're looking probably around 2022 before that happens.
That would
and that's not just for that's mental health, but also for patients right now. We have to transport them directly to an emergency room. Obviously, the costs are escalating. That's the big discussion nationwide, statewide, locally. And that's another thing we're looking at is to have that ability to transport somebody to an urgent care. It's called mobile integrated healthcare. And that is the future of healthcare for us. To maybe, instead of bringing everybody to an emergency room, maybe you bring them to an appropriate level of care. Have an interaction with the emergency room physician, but you might be able to bring them here locally to a Circle Health in Westford or to the place on Drum Hill.
You can see where both services are pivoting towards community wellness. It's not just they put out fires and we stop crimes. It's a pivot towards a societal addressment of, is your society well? You know what I'm saying? That's where the responsibilities and job functions have just expanded beyond what I would have ever guessed 10 years ago.
And I mean, I think it's an appropriate evolution, and I think you guys, as two professionals, and I've known both of you for a long time, I don't think we could have better people in the positions. You guys are terrific. But I think the public understanding, the general public's understanding maybe lags a little bit because I can remember when I was on the Board of Selectmen, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, the calls I used to get from people about what the police are doing or not doing, what the firefighters are doing and not doing, and there was, and even then, I mean, it wasn't to the point where it is now, but still, even when 12 years ago, it wasn't your father's fire and police department. There had been quite a bit of progress and evolution there. And just the level of misunderstanding about the mission that you guys have. And one thing, just to play a little bit off of what you've just been saying, can you guys maybe tell the folks a little bit about how you do interact and collaborate in various situations? I think people would be interested in hearing about that.
Well, we just had this discussion. And by the way, we just had at the North Congregational Church, our pastor, Steve, holds a service every year in November.
And for the audience, Steve Burkett is the fire department's official chaplain.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yep.
He's our unofficial one.
Well, and we say that
no, we love him.
Pastor Steve, to kind of go off
he
top.
does wear the firefighter uniform.
Yes.
Yes, so Pastor Steve,
That's where his passions lie. Just
there you go.
well, he's been with the North Congregational Church since 1996. He's been with us since 2001. So yes, he's been, even though he's the fire department pastor, I always say he's the honorary town pastor because
he's everywhere.
He officiates over so many
accurate.
events. Obviously, Memorial Day, Veterans Day. He's there for the opiate vigil. But we had this discussion about how we've collaborated. One of the things, we talked about, the active shooter drills. We started off at Lockheed Martin. They approached us to do this drill.
The company did.
The company, because they had an incident, one of their facilities down south, where somebody was killed. So they've embraced this training, and they've embraced it, the fact where they've actually closed down the actual business for a day and had employees participate fantastic drill. And then I think we built off some of the lessons learned from that drill. We've done active shooter drills in the schools. And I think every one we have a little bit of a takeaway.
And you get better.
And we get better at it. But even like we've had in June, we had a drill on the Merrimack River. The Mass DEP has been looking, they do drills on coastal waterway, but they've always looked to come inward to do it, but they couldn't find a willing partner. So myself, Chief Windward, and others, 2 years ago, we jumped on this in the planning stages, and it just grew from there. And then Jim and his folks joined us for this drill. Now, this is a drill that simulated a spill on the Merrimack River, and you had to protect the intakes, like in Lowell.
Hazmat.
Exactly, on the river. So, you know, why would you have the police involved? I mean, they have a boat, I mean, and fantastic partners, because one of the takeaways is we're going to need a lot of people to be able to pull off this protection. We actually have to put a big drape around the water intake. So he has a boat, we have a boat, Tingsboro, Lowell, Tewksbury. It's quite involved. So this is a multi-agency event, but again, it just kind of shows the collaboration. It wasn't just fire departments, police department, you know.
And the other outreach things we're doing is we have officers in the schools now, more than ever before. You know, 5 years ago we had 0. Now we have 3 full-time.
Is there a threshold level at the point that you decide to put an officer in the school, or how do you make
Well,
that
we,
decision?
quite frankly, we were behind. When I became chief in 2014, we had 0. Every
Right.
town that touched us had several school resources.
At least in the high
At
schools.
least one.
Yeah.
So that was an immediate goal, and we built off of that to have one at the high school, then one at the McCarthy, and now we have one at the Parker as well. So that's all about partnerships and building relationships. It's not a obviously there's a security component to it, but more importantly, it's the interaction the officers do with the kids.
And I was going to say, we just had that because we did, we have to buy the, we do so many evacuation drills.
Right.
So that drill involves not only just the fire department, we've been doing it for years, but you know, they interact with the school resource officer. Now Sean Shanahan is taking part in those, not only just for inspections, but he's actually helping us with the drills. He'll see stuff, he'll walk the floors.
That makes perfect sense.
And you know, so we're seeing that. It's not, it's, you know, building, police, fire. Sometimes we'll bring the health department. We're really seeing that interaction. It's really a team sport right now.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole idea. I mean, you guys, I mean, you have your respective jobs, and there is overlap, but there's also differentiation. But you are part of a larger team, and I think you work well together. I mean, my perception, having worked with the town manager for many years, is he fosters that kind of an approach. That's what he wants you folks to do.
Right.
You know, he doesn't want dissension. He wants cooperation, and he sees it as a team effort. And I think, you know, it's a testament to his management abilities and leadership that he has developed that kind of a team and has selected the right people to lead.
I agree. He's very supportive, and you know.
He lets us run our departments.
Right.
There's the mission, and then we get we're sent off to make sure that mission happens, and that's the last we hear of him.
Right.
You know.
No, he appreciates and we keep him updated. And one thing you know about the town manager, he appreciates a lot of information. He absorbs a lot of information. But I think, yes, I think he lets us do our job, and he supports us.
Yeah.
And not just support us with financing and capital, but you know, he's there to bounce things.
I've made a number of modifications to the command staff and department, always very supportive. So.
That's good. I mean, you're the professional, and his job as the ultimate manager is to evaluate the result, not to get concerned about how you would specifically do your job.
Right.
Evaluate the result. So that's the right way. We have a little less than a minute to go, and is there anything either of you would like to get out there in the 40 seconds or so that we have left?
I would just, again, Pastor Steve has served with us since 2001, so I would like to thank him. He's still with us. Pastor Steve is returning home to upstate Maine to take care of his mother, who's in her 90s. So I wish him, his wife Donna, well. He has served us and the town well for all these years, and he's a living legend. Not only does he know every member of the fire department, but he knows their family.
Yep.
So I want to get that out there.
Good.
Yep, best to him. And again, we're doing all we can social media-wise. Please reach out to us.
Right.
looking forward to hearing from everybody. Enjoy the holidays too as
Yeah,
they get
happy
closer.
holidays.
Yes, very good. Well, I want to thank you both again for appearing, and hopefully we'll have you back at some point.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.